Who are you?
I love that. I am a ball of amazing, vibrant energy who happens to be very successful in her career, but is also compassionate, driven, an entrepreneur, and just happens to be a specialist periodontist at the same time. So when I actually went into dentistry, I already set myself an intention. I want to be one of those dentists who people are not afraid to come and see. When you're looking for a mentor professionally, as opposed to a coach, you'll want to look for someone who has been there and done it, somebody who is in your field, but also I would encourage you to look for somebody who's also had the struggles. For resilience to happen, you have to build up your foundation to bounce back from failure. That's what it's all about.
What does success look like to you?
When I was your age, I probably would have said, a certain amount of money or having my own practice or 1 million qualifications and accolades, definitely more letters after my name than in my name. But now success is about having a sense of peace and joy within me, and I wake up every morning with a smile on my face and a joy, and there might be a load of rubbish happening and yet I still find my inner joy, and that is truly success because it's my ability to be myself.
Now, Dr. Rana Al-Falaki is a multi-talented clinician, best-selling author, international speaker, and highly accredited leadership coach. Yep, she's the real deal. An award-winning periodontist of over 20 years, she's no stranger to clinical excellence either. She was actually the global pioneer of periodontal lasers and was the first to integrate them into routine treatment in the UK. Now, behind all the accolades and awards lies someone truly dedicated to making positive impact on others. Founder of MedDent Leadership and Wellbeing Academy, creator of the Nail It Leadership System, and co-founder of the groundbreaking national wellbeing platform for dentistry, Rana's dedication to developing the unspoken parts of life as a dental professional is incredible, coaching top professionals to achieve optimal performance. Get ready for an episode that'll make you question the way you work and live completely. Let's get into it.
Hello and welcome back to The Young Dentist. For those of you who've been with us in season 1, I'm sure you can see the background has got a significant upgrade. We're happy to have you back. Today we have the absolute pleasure of being joined by Dr. Rana. Rana, how are you doing today?
I am amazing. How are you?
Doing very great, thanks. Awesome. Cool, Rana. So for our viewers who don't know you so far, who are you?
I love that. I just had this question a couple of weeks ago on the Dentology podcast, and we were talking about how often when you introduce yourself, you will always say, I am a blah, blah, blah. And I was talking about how my dad used to take me around to all of these receptions, and it was always like, this is my daughter, the dentist. This is, and it's so true. And I think so many dental students, a young dentist, will feel that exactly. And my point was, I don't ask people what they do, and if they tell me what they do professionally, I turn it around to them and I say, I didn't ask you that. I said, who are you? So anyway, sidestep, but who am I? So I am a ball of amazing, vibrant energy who happens to be very successful in her career, but is also compassionate, driven, an entrepreneur, and just happens to be a specialist periodontist at the same time.
Awesome. Maybe a better question to ask then, Rana, is
there we go. See, it's all in the question, I tell you.
Why are you? Makes you very driven. Why are you then?
Why am I? Why is anybody, right? I think it's a real gift when you're able to truly connect to your purpose. And it can be a really tough thing. Again, particularly say for your listeners who are that much younger and they're a bit institutionalized at the moment. They'll be going through a whole set of 5 years and then a foundation year, and the same with your young dentists. And they're bound to start questioning the why, because it's tough and it's stressful and it's frustrating, and you don't feel like you're heard or you're listened to half of the time, and your patients don't turn up, and you've got this tick box, and it's really hard, right? So I would really urge them to actually think about exactly that, the why. For me, the why is I related to what my purpose was, and it was always about creating impact. So when I actually went into dentistry, I already set myself an intention. And that intention was, I do not want to be, or I set myself a challenge, I should say. And the challenge was, I want to be one of those dentists who people are not afraid to come and see. And that was almost my intention from day one. So it set my path for my why, I suppose. And then I also, of course, we adopt our beliefs from our upbringing, from our surroundings, from those people around us. And so my family were always highly educated, very high achieving. So for me, good enough was never good enough. Mm-hmm. Everything had to be the very best. And so that's what I strove for. I did my maths A-level a year early. Of course, it was all all A's across the board, much to the chagrin of my now teenagers who say they really feel the pressure, even though I'm not nagging them. And at the same time, so I took that through to dental school. I remember it was really shocking in the first year when suddenly I wasn't top of the class because you were the best of the best and the creme de la creme. And you were doing all these exams with the medical students and you were suddenly only okay. And it's like, how could I only be okay? I used to be the best. But you work your way through, so it's all about your ethic, really. And so for me, my ethic was to be the very best at whatever I try, and I've carried that ethic through my entire life.
I feel like you mentioned something there that's a really important point, which is, and a lot of people do say this, is everyone who gets into dental school is the top of the top in the class, and you have to be, right? In order to study dentistry, it's a very difficult profession, and you've got a lot of responsibility in your hands as well. And you mentioned there about getting into dental school and then not feeling almost top of the class anymore. Do you recall the exact point that happened for you where you felt, actually, I'm completely out of my comfort zone now?
Yeah, I probably wasn't quite out of my comfort zone, but there were definitely some people who failed that first year who then clearly were. It was so I qualified from what is now Queen Mary in Mile-End, and at the time it was Barts in the London. And so the first year, the curriculum's changed a little bit now. So we didn't do any clinical in that first year. It was all Mile-End and the odd sort of trip down to Whitechapel. And so when you did your exams, which were modular, you would go and you'd see all your exam results on the top of the board. And the first module I remember was MOCI, molecules, cells and tissues. That bit was okay. It was pretty detailed, pretty intense, but did all right. And then for some reason, cardiovascular and thoracic, which made so much sense. And yet I just remember somehow why, you're getting 50%, 60%, which apparently was a really good pass, but we're used to getting 80s, 90s, right? And so I just remember that exact point, seeing my name on the notice board thinking, am I struggling? Because I seem to be working really hard, but why am I not answering these questions? And I don't know about you guys now, but the multiple choice used to be reverse scoring as well. So there was no guessing whatsoever. I mean, that said, by the end of my first year, I came away with plenty of distinction. So it was enough to propel me forward to be like, okay, I've got to study even harder here. I've got to think outside of the box, not just what I'm being spoon fed, but what more can I learn to make myself as good as I want to be.
Yeah. And, you mentioned there about the scoreboard. Could you see everyone else's score?
Yeah.
You must have been comparing yourself to
well, I mean, okay, so I compared myself to the dentist and I was doing fine. But when you're there with 300 other people and it's all these top grade medics, it was like, oh, actually, okay, well, there we go.
So Rana, that was your first year or so of dental school, right? How did it change going forward into FD, rest of dental school? How was that like?
So I don't think my purpose and my why changed. I think it evolved, this idea of impact. My FD year, that in those days called vocational training, was really significant though, because I went off to the Canterbury scheme and I worked in 2 different clinics. So I had 2 VT trainers who were brothers, Ashley and Derek Watson. And Ashley particularly spent a lot of time with me just really focusing on what is quality dentistry and how can you go beyond yourself to provide really good quality care. So it wasn't one of these, okay, I'm just going to bash it out on the NASH and do as much and they're going to earn their money from all the patients that I saw. So it was really ingrained to me, I think, at that point, which ultimately led to me wanting to be a specialist because I was never a jack of all trades, and it was a case of, okay, I'm good, and I was a good general dentist. I'm well aware of that. Patients wanted to follow me everywhere. I did work in general practice after my vocational training year, after my FD year, and yet I wanted to be even better, which then led to my decision to specialize in perio.
Awesome. So it sounds like Ash was quite a formative person, How helpful would you say it is to have mentors in your journey?
Yeah, that's such a good point, and so important. There's a difference, right? So there's an idea of when you have a group of people, there are always going to be people below you, below your capability and below your drive. But I would always encourage you to find a group of people also who are above you as well. If you can find that whole mix within a group, it's brilliant because you will benefit from teaching and bringing people up, and you'll also benefit so much from other people being able to pull you up. So mentors, people to look up to, people who are willing to take you under their wing, people who are willing to advise you, and your willingness and openness to learn and remain curious really is the key. Is so important. And if you can find that through dental school, which I know you guys already have, I mean, I just think that's amazing.
So, Rana, what is a good mentor? How do you know if something's right for you?
Yeah, what is a good mentor? Well, interesting, I teach a diploma in coaching, mentoring and
There you go.
education. So you've asked a good question there. A mentor is somebody, so when you're looking for a mentor professionally, as opposed to a coach, you'll want to look for someone who has been there and done it. Somebody who is in your field. But also, I would encourage you to look for somebody who's also had the struggles, because it means they've learned, right? They're not just teaching you something from a textbook, having had a straightforward path, because you may struggle. So you want that mentor to be able to help guide you through those struggles, rather than just, this is the way we go from A to B. It's a case of, no, this is the way we go from A to B via X, Y, Z. So somewhere who's been there, someone who's done that, somebody who is successful, but also somebody who is a good listener, who is compassionate, who is a great communicator, and someone who can really advise you effectively. That's what you want to look for in a mentor.
Yes. I mean, how have mentors impacted you throughout your journey now? I know you mentioned when you graduated, you had mentors. I mean, are there any specific stories that you might have related to, I don't know, you couldn't quite get something and maybe you went to one of your mentors?
Yeah, sadly not. Well, not that much. So I was a bit of a loner. You know, I went through my own kind of personal journey and did a lot of stuff alone. And I suppose that's the classic life of an entrepreneur. So what I preach now is not necessarily what I did. I'd love to find a mentor. I need to find someone who's been there and done that and has the same amount of drive. And I tell you, in my day, they were not meant. We see them now, right? You mentioned Jin and Kish from the Smile Clinic group. They are fantastic ambassadors for our profession. In my day, there were not people like that when I was that age. So there weren't that many people to be my mentors. And Ashi, I think, as my trainer, was kind of a mentor through that period of time. I think when I decided to specialize, there was Prof. Francis Hughes, who was at Guy's, who's now retired. He had also been my undergraduate tutor in perio, so I'd always looked up to Francis. I really, truly admired him. So I went from being undergraduate to postgraduate student to then co-researcher and collaborator with him. So that was one hell of a journey. So I suppose in some ways he was kind of a mentor, but he was certainly someone I looked up to. But other than that, like, everything I've done has been on my own. And yet I notice now I'm always in search of other people, not to give me advice because I know what to do, but someone who can help me bounce ideas off. Because when you get your creative juices flowing and you ask someone's advice, it's not about, I don't actually want your advice for approval. I just want to start a conversation so that we can build our creativity and build our instincts. So that's what I would be looking for now.
I see. So, Rana, you mentioned perio there, right? What would you recommend to a student thinking about specializing, and why did you choose perio?
I would always say, what do you enjoy the most? So for me, and remember, I did maths A level early, remember? So I liked numbers, and there's a lot of numbers in perio, so maybe that was part of it. It just made perfect sense when I was in dental school. And I know that's tough because I think perio is one of the, I've taught undergrads and postgrads, and I know one of the biggest challenges they have is in getting good results with perio. So they come away almost thinking this stuff doesn't work. And unfortunately, it blinkers their opinion once they leave dental school, which is a real shame for those patients, because perio has a massive impact on people's general health and inflammation. It's probably, the one that's most linked to medicine and health, which is obviously my other huge passion, right? But for me, perio made complete and utter sense. It's what I enjoyed. So if you're looking to specialize, think about, what do you enjoy the most? What do you not feel stressed about when you do it? And then align it with your purpose. Like I said, my purpose was about making a difference to my patients' lives. And in perio, I felt I truly could. I have patients who will give me a huge hug. I don't wake up with blood on my pillow anymore. I can have a conversation with my partner without putting my hand over my mouth. I don't feel conscious about my bad breath. I can eat whatever I want now. I can smile confidently. So those are ways of, and I feel so much healthier. Those are ways of making an impact through what I do with perio. Other specialties will do the same in different ways, especially when it comes to confident smiling and eating. So what is it that aligns with your purpose? With me, one of my biggest values was health. And so for me, perio was so aligned with that in particular. And don't be put off by the long pathway either, because I remember at the time thinking, oh gosh, that's 6 years gone. And then we had to do MFDS, that's another 2 years. And then 3 years specialist training and, eventually get there. And all my friends are off on skiing holidays and having a great time. And there I am, still a pauper, still studying, being a registrar that's unpaid in a mono-specialty. But I would never regret it and I'd never look back. So you've got to study for a long time and you've got to work in that field for a long time. Specialization is this unique field of working full-time and studying full-time. It's very difficult to get a life outside of that and to have a balance. So it has to be something you enjoy.
Yeah. I think it's tricky as well because a lot of students, the young dentists especially, they're almost in this area where they know they enjoy dentistry. They know they might want to go deeper into something like perio or a specialty, but they're still not exactly sure on what specialty they can do. And not a lot of students and young dentists feel that strong affinity, maybe as you did, towards a certain specialty. What do you advise them so that they can maybe find out more about these specialties? Because, for example, myself, right, we covered perio recently and I kind of enjoyed it. I looked at the surgery, I didn't feel put off by it. But also I know it's complicated and exactly what you said, I know it's a really long period of training. So what would you give advice to myself or other students and young dentists out there so that they can explore those options before committing so much of their life to a specialty?
The first thing I would say is it's okay not to specialize. Yeah, because we have this whole path of I must be better, I must be the best. Our country does need really good general practitioners. So the first thing is just give yourself permission. You're not settling if you choose to be in general practice. And then there are further education pathways within general practice to do really well. If you want to specialize, it's back to mentors, isn't it? It's go and spend some time with those specialists in their practices. And most specialists would be very open to dental students or new young dentists coming and sitting by their side and seeing what a couple of days look like actually doing that subject, because you'll get so much more insight to it beyond what you learn in dental school. And interestingly, you mentioned surgery and it didn't put you off. Well, I barely do any surgery. So actually, it's all about talking to my patient. It's supportive periodontal therapy. It's non-surgical therapy. And then, of course, all the work I do with lasers, which is then minimally invasive surgery. So yes, there can be a lot of blood, but not quite in the same kind of way. Orthodontics, on the other hand, but if you don't do surgical orthodontics with placement of implants, then it's a much more dry subject and it's much more mechanical. So also what suits you, what do you think you enjoy? The best way is to go and spend a few days. And remember, you don't have to specialize either. You can do diplomas, right? Just spend some time doing some diplomas and then decide, actually, I'm going to be a dentist with a special interest. And that's okay too.
Could you expand on that a bit more? Because I know there's some people in the audience who don't actually know about diploma route and kind of the routes like that.
Yeah, so obviously we have what we call DIPSIs now, so dentists with special interests who might go and do a postgraduate diploma, they might go and do a master's degree in a particular subject. It doesn't make them a specialist. So you can't, if you did perio, you can't call yourself a periodontist. That's the distinction. And yet you may learn a lot more about the subject beyond what you learned in dental school to equip you with the confidence and the skills to perhaps take on more of those patients within your practice and start to form your own little specialty in inverted commas where you particularly enjoy doing one particular area. So yeah, postgraduate diploma is definitely something you can look at beyond foundation year.
So Rana, you're known for one thing in perio, from what I've heard. Lasers. Talk to me about lasers.
It's a kind of a rod for my own back because I'm now known as the laser periodontist. And whenever I run my courses, it's kind of like it, but it's not a laser perio course. It's a perio course because that ultimately is what I'm passionate about, transforming the lives of my patients and getting people to really understand how to manage perio. And it's not just what you do with your hands. It's reading the case and understanding the patient in the first place. But yes, so my laser journey was all based around intuition. So I mentioned curiosity, right? And as scientists, we need to maintain curiosity, which again can be very difficult to do when you're in dental school because you're being fed everything. And we almost forget that we're all scientists, actually. And the art of science is curiosity. So after about 10 years being a specialist, I was always very curious. and I kept going to conferences, and I was wanting the next thing because I had 2 perio practices by this point that I'd built up from scratch and was doing really well. And as you've probably gathered, yes, my entrepreneurial spirit and this desire to do more and be more and make even more of an impact. But the literature and everything about lasers was very negative. So every conference we went to said, no real benefit. Nothing's really coming through. They're around, but no big deal. And then I was at a trade show, and I bumped into this wonderful friend of mine, Kohan Rajan, who has now sadly died due to what got triggered. Actually, I'm going to say it because it's relevant, a GDC complaint that went on for several years that was clearly malicious by an ex-friend of his, and he had evidence to support that, but it didn't matter because it had started going down that path. Mm-hmm. And so he sadly turned to alcohol. So unfortunately, when he was suffering from sepsis, his partner thought that he was just drunk. And then he sadly died from sepsis at the age of 48. An utterly brilliant, amazing, cutting edge, fantastic dentist. So shout out to Kohan Rajan, because the profession really lost someone amazing there. Mm-hmm. But Kohan said to me at the time, Rana, you've got to go and check out this laser. And of course, being an arrogant specialist at the time, no, they don't work. I've been to the conferences. This is what everybody has said. And then it was, but Rana, you can get into the focations. And I was like, but I'm a periodontist. No problem. I can get into focations. I've got skills. And then he said, Rana, you can remove biofilm. And I just remember thinking, okay, now you've piqued my interest. And I went off to find the stand, expecting to find this minute, tiny little machine. And then instead it was this big red machine that we joke is a bit like the red Ferrari of dentistry. Mm-hmm. And anyway, I spoke to someone at the time. There were no specialists using them. And my brain just started to think, maybe there is something in this. Maybe we could regenerate bones. So again, curiosity, right? It was a big gamble. It was a £60,000 gamble. Wow. The first specialist in the country to adopt lasers into her practice. And I didn't do the whole American or Middle Eastern thing of, this is an amazing thing and you must do it. It was almost an experiment on my patients. I didn't say anything. I just told them I was going to add lasers into the protocol for how I was treating them. And then gradually, after the space of a year and taking more radiographs and honing my protocols, I got to the stage where I was consistently regenerating bone around infrabony defects. So for your students, that's when you look at the radiographs and the bone is very kind of what I call dippy. It's angular. It goes up and down a lot. So typically non-surgical treatment doesn't work in those cases. That's when we need to look at surgery or regeneration of some kind. So that's when I took it to Francis Hughes at Guy's, and they bought a laser, and then we started that whole research journey. And then I've obviously published several papers since then showing it's not about comparing apples and pears, which unfortunately is what is still happening with the randomized trials of you're not necessarily going to get better results in a periodontist's hands for 6mm pockets. But I have several areas where I've shown resolution of 50mm pockets and focation involvement and regeneration of bone, so it comes into its own. And it really did. It elevated my career much more. From a practice point of view, I have patients who would travel all around the world and the country to come and see me. And I traveled all around the world lecturing and speaking, and I guess became this global pioneer. So still fulfilling my purpose of impact.
So, Rana, favorite country you traveled to? Out of all the ones you went to, what would you say the best one was? One that sticks out?
I love Canada, actually.
How come?
Yeah, I loved Canada. I think I've been there several times. The climate was always so lovely. The people were always so lovely. I just remember waking up in these amazing hotels looking over Vancouver Harbour. And my host, actually, for the conferences were just like, you'd be assigned someone who would look after you the whole day, make sure you found your tea and coffee, sit with you over lunch, these fantastic views. Anyway, like I said, been to Canada several times. I've been up to Lake Louise, to the Rockies as well. And it's a wonderful, wonderful country. I mean, look, my first international venture was China.
Oh, how is that?
So that was pretty amazing. Like, you're speaking and everybody looks completely faceless. They don't smile at you, but you realize they're listening to your translation, and then the applause is okay. So that was interesting. So yeah, I mean, I've been all over I've been China, India, the States, Canada, Australia for a weekend. Most of Europe, some of South America. I mean, literally 5 continents, all talking about laser perio.
What a journey it's been.
Yeah. Is there anything that stood out to you at one of the conferences, or anything that, like, maybe you weren't expecting that you got from visiting all these conferences? Maybe like a mindset shift or anything like that?
That's a good question, and I'm actually going to be really boring and say no. What I am going to say is about the way that I teach is very different now. So I kind of, after the pandemic, I kind of stepped a little bit away from the whole lecture circuit, and I was then running some of my own courses in the UK. And then recently, so now I just am really picky because it sounds really glamorous, but eventually it gets exhausting and really quite lonely, one hotel room after the next. And I made it a point not to always travel with my laptop either. It's a case of actually let me have boundaries and let me go on a proper holiday. And then if I go for work, I go for work. But recently I went to South Africa. So I agreed to go because the person who invited me has become a really good friend. I've been there many times before, but not actually for 10 years. And now with everything I do as a coach and a trainer, I realized I taught, and I'm a professional speaker as well. So I taught in an extremely different way. And obviously when I teach about perio, I'm always engaging in people's life, because perio really is about tapping into people's mindsets and lifestyle, which is one of my journeys, of what fascinated me to get into coaching in the first place. But I taught that group of 60 dentists in a completely different way, and I moved them, and at the end of it they just all said, I've never been to a dentistry course like it, because they went on their own personal journey as well. And the way that I was able to engage them and challenge them, I wasn't teaching them just clinical skills, they realized I was teaching them life skills. And we definitely had so many people coming up to me afterwards, definitely a few tears in the audience as well, and you're thinking, but she's teaching perio. And also I think teaching so much more through stories. And of course, that's how we learn, right? When we do something in dental school or as a young dentist, and honestly, this carries on through your whole career. When something goes wrong, that's how you learn far more than when things go right. So there's an opportunity there, as painful as it may be. And that is very much so. If we learn from that, that's a story, right? It's a story you're going to go and tell someone else. It's why you do an incident audit as well, because you learn from what happened. So the more we can teach each other through stories rather than facts, it evokes our emotions, and that allows us to learn much more effectively anyway.
So Rana, I had the pleasure of going to the Nailed launch actually a few weeks back, and I saw how you were very hands-on and interactive in the way you teach. What inspired you to teach that way? What did you want to change about the current or the prior education landscape?
That's just my style.
Oh yeah? It's who you are.
It's who I am. Yeah, and exactly. So I think that's just my authenticity, right? I love fun. We learn so much more when we are happy. We learn so much more when things are fun and enjoyable. And sitting there just being in a lecture with someone giving you monotone, and I've been in a lot of those, you switch off anyway. So experiential learning, you learn 90% more than if you were just sitting there reading a book. So when I created Nail It, and obviously it was available to general people before I honed it into, I've created it via MedDent as a specific dental medical version. It has a whole kind of acronym that I call about being transforming, and in amongst that it's experiential, it is transforming, it's a safe space, it's motivational, and it is mind-boggling. It will challenge you, it will push you out of your comfort zone, but it's also fun. And I of course love seeing people's growth, and just even in that day, right, you would come away with some takeaways to hopefully move forward and take some things to keep on growing.
100%. So you mentioned there, Rana, how it's important to have fun and the positivity, right? But let's take a step back. You mentioned before that GDC case. What do you think of the dark side of dentistry that not talked about? Because of course this platform is very useful for the younger dentists to get that insight. What are the things that you wish you were told before about dentistry that you had to learn the hard way?
Yeah, well, actually, you're about to, BDJ in practice are about to, I've got the cover article for the start of May, actually, and I talk about exactly this and how it's time to really start changing the narrative. So this is why I've come back into dentistry in terms of with my coaching hat on, because I was doing that to the business world, and I've kind of come back with a passion, partly because of Cohen's story as well, and my passion to really change what happens. So we've got to start changing the narrative. And we hear this word resilience so often, right? Well, nail it. Resilience is literally one component of 38. It's about how do we create a performance-driven profession where we talk about, in dentistry, we talk about prevention, right? You're all taught about prevention, preventing caries, preventing periodontal disease. And yet, why are we not preventing the stress in the first place? So for resilience to happen, you have to build up your foundation to bounce back from failure. That's what it's all about, right? And yet, what if we don't have to go through that experience? What if you start to resonate at a point where you don't feel the stress? Because what would have caused you stress in the past doesn't cause you stress anymore by strengthening yourself. So this is what I call optimal performance, which is everything that Nail It encompasses.
So what's an optimal performer?
Exactly. So an optimal performer is somebody who is a high performer, but without burnout, without the negative side, someone who can be very highly successful in every aspect. So you master balance, happiness, and productivity all together, which sadly is very lacking. And we think about high performance like being the driven, right? Let's look at the burnout rates, and this is what you guys need to know. So the burnout rates are over 50% in the latest studies, and over 86% reporting high levels of stress. So what if we prevent the stress in the first place? So the circumstances may still be there, but it's the filters that we wear, and it's how we view it, and it's who we actually become. So this is what needs to be taught in dental school. We need to be taught about not just, how you communicate and role play with your patient, but actually how do we communicate in a needs-based way? How do you honor your needs? How do you set your boundaries, your emotional boundaries and your time boundaries? How can you deal with all of your self-talk, all of the negative doubts, all of the expectations, right? My daughter, the dentist, the expectations that are put on you. I mean, that is not an uncommon thing in dentistry today, right? For the young dentist. So your communication, your needs, your emotional intelligence is your powerhouse to success.
How do you detect the steps leading up to burnout? How do you realize the triggers and how do you realize that you're on the way to burnout, and how do we actually tackle that early so that we can prevent burnout?
So that you can prevent it in the first place. Right? So, I mean, part of it is let's start teaching you in the first place so that you never even end up on that path. Let's teach you those 38 components of optimal performance so that you can really achieve brilliant things without it. But recognizing burnout, well, actually it's not being unproductive. Quite often people who are suffering from burnout are really productive. They have this huge, massive burst, but then they'll crash afterwards. So they'll crash a few days later. Lack of boundaries is a massive one for burnout. So if you're the person who always says, yeah, I'll do it, and you take on all the burden, when you start to get a bit of brain fog, lack of clarity, you start to notice that things are starting to lack. You lose your enthusiasm and your fun where you usually found it. When things are perhaps causing you more stress than they did previously, those are warning signs. So you're going to have links to this podcast, right?
Of course.
So brilliant. So I will share with you the link to one of the tests I've created, which is Test Your Burnout Rate. And then you can see actually are you low, medium or high, and what's your actual score, so that you can start the path to make sure that it doesn't happen, right? Are you on the warning sign or are you very nearly there? And then what do you need to do about it?
We'll leave that in the link in the description.
Awesome. So Rana, you mentioned boundaries. How can you set boundaries as a student? Because it can seem very easy to get caught up in student life. How can a student set boundaries?
I think this is about understanding yourself and having your own self-confidence, so you don't get stuck in that vocabulary of I should really be doing this, I should really be doing that. It's very easy in that peer-pressured environment as well to see what everybody else is doing. It's a bit like social media. We think everybody's having a good time, and actually most people are incredibly unhappy, miserable and depressed. So it's very much the same in dental school. Just because you think that someone else is having a great time, just because you see that someone else is doing all this other stuff, doesn't mean you have to. So align yourself with what is right for you, and eliminate the word I should. That's from a kind of a social and pushing the boundaries element. Do the absolute necessary and then ask yourself, where do I want to be? And actually get yourself a mentor. Find yourself a mentor who's going to help guide you to develop and push the way you need to push. You can't say no to the tutors. I know that. You can't say no to the workload. But you can learn to prioritize your time more effectively. So, of course, one of those elements of nail it, I mentioned the 3 big things, right? Happiness, productivity, and balance. But in amongst that Venn diagram is flow. So how can you get to a point where you can tap into flow, which means you are super productive. So you're going to get all the work done and then find time for all the other things that you might like to fit in. There are a million reasons why people are not actually productive. So even though you're being given this huge amount of workload, trust me, there is actually enough time to do that and have a life outside and look after your health and spend time with your family and friends. But you need to know the right way how. So you need to eliminate procrastination. You need to maximize your time. You need to shift what's inside of you. That's what's really going to make you the most. You need to nail it, basically. That's, it's a formula for, I talk about the play model. If you master nail it, you master productivity.
So you mentioned the flow, focusing, eliminating procrastination. Many people and many students in today's age, in the digital world with short attention spans, don't have that focus. How do you recommend someone to eliminate procrastination from their life?
Absolutely. So it's firstly, digital detox, right? Preserve yourself. Make sure you have enough sleep. Make sure you eat properly. Make sure that you hydrate. Make those 100% priorities and no exception. Give yourself a digital detox. Make sure that phone is away outside of your bedroom before you go to sleep and is switched off at least 1 hour minimum before you go to bed. That this is sacred. Like that is a non-negotiable. That's some of the things. How else do you eliminate procrastination? Well, the thing is, it's like, why are you procrastinating in the first place? A lot of people will be procrastinating due to fear and due to limiting beliefs and due to looking at everybody else and telling themselves a story that isn't necessarily true. So that's where fear comes in. That's where anxiety comes in. That's where opinions about other people come in. So they may be fear of success. It can be fear of failure. There are so many reasons why people procrastinate. So ask yourself, what is it you're truly afraid of? What is it that's stopping you? And the way to actually just get into flow is to just start anyway. So, of course, you came to the nail experience. I made you smash boards, right? Everybody was worried that they were going to end up with an injured wrist. And in the end, not one person failed first time. But it came from mindset, not from physical ability. So you have to develop that mindset to understand who you are, why you're doing it, align with your purpose and your passion, and believe in yourself.
Yeah, and you're talking about like really facing yourself, essentially what's inside your mind and what you're really feeling in your subconscious. That can be scary too, though, right? I mean, coming to terms with the fact that the reason that you're in such a state is because you've not faced your internals. I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you overcome that fear in the first place? And
it's difficult to even identify, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a real thing. I mean, I didn't realize that I didn't love myself for about 45 years.
Wow.
And realized, okay, so this whole driven, crazy woman who was, yes, incredibly successful, but pushed herself to be ill and to burn out and all kinds of other things, was because I had the proof. I call the prover gremlin. So for me, it was this constant need to prove myself, so that by having these external validation, I was surely a good person. I was surely good enough. I must love myself. And it was only the eventual realization, having become ill, and like my final wake-up call to realize, well, actually, I don't love myself. And so I needed to start there. So that was it. It was a case of, I am good enough and I am worthy. And I am worthy of respect. And if I don't succeed at something, that doesn't make me a failure. It just means that wasn't successful.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned there before, Rana, briefly going back a second, you can be scared of failure, you can have fear of failure. But you also mentioned you can be scared of success.
Absolutely, yeah.
What does that look like?
Fear of success is just, it's almost just, I suppose it's like seeing the finish line and thinking, wow, have I really almost got there? And then suddenly freezing. And this happens a lot. It's especially in the entrepreneurial world, because you push and you push and you push. And unless you've already visualized in a very powerful way that you've gone over that finish line, it's very, very hard to get in your own way. So it's interesting. I wrote an article about this in a business magazine, actually a few years ago now, about intuition and how you can really use intuition. It's a really, really powerful leadership skill, but you need to have your phone off some of the time, digital detox, because you need to allow intuition to come in. And I remember talking about like getting in my own way and visualizing like this really successful business with all of these coaching clients, etc. Then realizing that actually it's not as simple as visualizing. It was actually, you need to align it with yourself so much more. And I realized, but actually there was something stopping me. And that was, I didn't want to really deep down change one appointment-based career for another appointment-based career, i.e. a ton of patients for a ton of clients, because I didn't want to be beholden to needing to be on a Zoom call and a phone and certain things at certain times. So that was my own fear of success. But I had to use my intuition to finally dig deep and realize what was stopping me.
So, while you're on that journey and you've come so far and then towards what you thought was success for you, and then at the last moment realizing that, is this actually what I wanted to do in the first place? That's really tough. Turning back from that or changing your trajectory, that must have been tough.
And that's the entrepreneur in you as well, right? An entrepreneur will try and try again and not be afraid of trying and never think that something is a failure, right? There's always a learning opportunity. So for me, I always say that I never have any regrets. Everything is a lesson. And everything is an opportunity. And you get to the point when you can train yourself to shift to that opportunity almost immediately. So you never end up in the sludge of stress or procrastination, because you can bounce back again straight away and just think, okay, what can I learn from this? What went right? What didn't go so well? And then what can I use moving forward? And okay, I didn't succeed in that. And maybe that wasn't the way I wanted to go, but that's okay. I've learned from it and I'm now going to be even better.
So, Rana, do you think dentists should be entrepreneurs?
Well, we talked about what we should be learning in dental school, right? Let's talk about the business skills that dentists do not, you don't get them. And yet most of you will emerge needing to be an associate or a practice owner. When you're an associate, you are your business. You still need to be self-employed. You still need to manage money. You need to manage taxes. You need to be able to negotiate. You really do. It's like, okay, you sign a contract. You don't become victim to that contract. Negotiate your contract to align with you, the hours you want to work, the materials that you want. People shouldn't be telling you what to do. So even as an associate, you are a business. So you need those skills. And if you are a business, and you're a small business, being yourself or then owning a practice, you need entrepreneurial training, 100%. Gotcha. It needs to happen.
So, Rana, you mentioned there as well briefly, going back a couple of steps, time. What is your relationship with time?
What is my relationship with time?
Quite deep, but...
Well, no, just immediately think. So I'll tell you a story, actually. So a couple of years ago, I went to see a shamanic healer. I was really, as I said, I'd stepped back from doing that much clinical dentistry and I was exploring my spiritual path. And I actually still think now when I cut down, I will go and train to be a shaman. I mean, I'm just fascinated by it. But shamanism is about being with nature, being at one with nature. That's the actual true meaning of it. So I went to see this shamanic healer and I spent the whole day with him. We talked about mentors, right? So I was just fascinated. He spent the whole day with me talking about all these different things. And then he did some healing on me. And then afterwards we sat down and he talked about time. And he just said, you've got to remember that what your future may be in your past.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
what does that mean?
I'm just going to sit with that for a minute because you've got to get your head around that, right? You're just like, what does that even mean? Mm-hmm. So time, I mean, we are on this coherent path together. There could be this entire meeting going on that could have happened in our past or is happening now in our future in a completely different way. Like, what wavelength are we actually on? What dimension do we actually happen to sit on? Mm-hmm. So for me, time is a fascinating one because when people talk about time as well, I hear so many limiting beliefs. The classic is, I don't have time. or when I have time. And for me, that tells me it's in the type of some of the coaching we do. We talk about particular energy levels that are related to your different level of consciousness and your attitude and your behavior. So if you say, I don't have time, it means you're victim to time, versus time is abundant and there is always time for anything. So my relationship with time, I will, if I ever say that, I correct myself automatically, because you all have time. It just depends what is your priority.
Do you think you can make time?
Time is energy. It cannot be created or destroyed, but it can be converted from one form to another.
What does that mean?
So you can create time for what it is you desire. It's finite in this particular moment in time, this little dot that we happen to be on this wavelength.
But it can be channeled?
But it can be channeled, exactly. So you can turn it from being on your phone to being productive and just reprioritizing what's truly important. So a tip for you, it's what I get my clients to do. In the morning, I will always set intentions. I set intentions the night before, so I wake up with a better energy anyway. But it's always right. What are my three of all this list of things I have to do today? What are my three top priorities that align with my bigger goal, with my purpose? And those are the things I'm going to start that day. And I'm going to start on the hardest things, not the easiest things, so that I get into flow and I get them over and done with.
You mentioned about almost a point about awareness earlier, and you said something really interesting. You said about checking yourself, right? You when you notice you have that thought about you don't have time, you check yourself. I mean, how does one build that awareness, and how important is it to really check what you're telling yourself, and what's the link between that and the outcomes that you achieve?
So in coaching, we ask you not to stack questions because you never know where the direction is going to go. But I think I remember. So consciousness is about self-awareness, right? So if you go on this journey and you become a more conscious being, you train yourself, right? You empower this personal development journey, which, yes, I mean, this isn't a plug, but that's exactly what Naila does. So it takes you on this journey of self-awareness to understand and know yourself. And then it's all about training, right? We go to the gym, we train our muscles. It doesn't happen we might feel great because we've been to the gym once. That isn't going to build muscles or stamina. You have to keep doing it, right? So it's exactly the same with mindset. The thought processes, you have to train your brain, neuroplasticity, the way the neural pathways develop. We develop new pathways, we train our brain, but that comes through repetition as well. So repetition of thought. And negative thinking is huge. I mean, it's a commonly quoted statistic but the jury's out. But we think we have between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day. Of which, wait for it, of which about 70 to 80% are negative, and 95% are repetitive. So you have to check yourself, because unless you're aware, you're constantly going to be going down the spiral of negative thinking. And you have to keep on, the more aware you become, it's like, hang on, wait, I'm telling myself this. No. Like, shake your head, correct yourself. Say it out loud if needs be. When you're spiraling, I teach my clients to turn around and because the vocabulary is going on in your head, turn around and say out loud, stop. Literally. So it's like a voice that is telling you to stop, but it's not in your head, which means it's so much louder. And it allows you to wait, hold on a second, take a pause and regroup. And what am I thinking? Is that thought useful to me? No. What do I need to be thinking instead to achieve this task at hand? Or what do I need to be thinking in order to be feeling, in order to be acting?
Wow.
So it's a process.
Yeah.
But it takes practice.
Yeah. And there's one more thing I wanted to ask around mentors. We've spoken about choosing the right mentor, but how can you be the right mentee for a mentor so that you can take as much as possible and actually implement it?
So firstly, there has to be alignment, right? The two of you have to get on. There has to be likability and respect as well. Otherwise, that person isn't you. They might be your teacher, but not your mentor, right? You don't necessarily like our teachers. Sometimes we don't even know who our teachers are because we learn through those lessons and encounters. So you need to have a conversation with that person, both of you. And you also then need to set goals and expectations for that relationship. So I know when I coach somebody, for example, I will expect them to carry out the work that they've committed themselves to. So in a mentoring situation, it should be the same. You know, if you're just taking all the knowledge and then you're not acting, there's no point. So yes, listen, take the advice, challenge. Do not be afraid to ask questions until you are completely sure that you understand. And don't be afraid to turn around and say, that isn't in alignment with me, because as people, we never really like being told what to do. And if our mentor is just telling us to do it one particular way and you don't feel it's really you, it's not your authentic self, you're not going to be happy and you're not going to get the most out of that mentor either. So again, we're right back to self-awareness again, aren't we? Being your authentic self, being unafraid to challenge, unafraid to ask questions, be curious, be open, and create that open environment for those discussions. So then your mentor can turn around and give and help you find a way to do it your way.
Gotcha. So Rana, can you talk us briefly about what you think stress is and how the Breathe platform can help students tackle stress and confront it head on?
Yeah, I mean, stress is energy, right? Stress is a force. Stress is a force that needs to be there. So let's not forget that, okay? So stress, fright, flight, sympathetic nervous system, the need for adrenaline, it's there for survival. The problem is chronic stress is where we get the damage, right? Because normally you would have stress. You have stress every time you eat, every time you exercise, every time your heart rate comes up for whatever reason, but you need to recover. Just like the Stefan curve. Yep, the pH goes up, it needs to come down to minimize caries risk. And stress is exactly the same. So the danger is chronic stress. So we are back, and that's, of course, we know. So we've talked about burnout, but what are the other signs, right? So physical symptoms, headache, backache, neck ache, brain fog, indecisiveness, procrastination, distracting yourself, self-destructive behavior, escapism, looking for dopamine hits, looking for highs, be that through addiction from alcohol, drugs, food, other habits, what I call being a wantoholic, which I definitely was, right? So just always doing, wanting to feel better, needing the dopamine hit. So it's when that stress becomes destructive. So what can you do about it? Again, it becomes, well, let's go on to the Breathe Dental Wellness website. Why don't we? Yeah. So of course, we've just launched this platform and it's for the entire dental community. It is, be you a student, be you a young dentist, be you someone who's towards the end of your career. And this is why this was such a big project, so close to my heart, that we created. So Breathe Dental Wellness is an acronym, and everything on there is designed to help you manage stress. Of course, the prevention piece, 100%, which we've talked about, right? Let's turn you into someone where stress doesn't even impact you. But otherwise, if you're suffering, go on there and look at those hacks. So Breathe stands for mindfulness and breathwork and stress reduction. And there's all little videos on there with instruction from breathwork specialists, from mindfulness experts, giving you, because we understand dentistry, so you specific to the dental profession. So we're not going to tell you to go out for a 1 hour walk when you actually really don't have an hour, back to that time relationship. But we'll give you the hacks for how that's going to work for you in your being someone in the dental profession. So breathwork, mindfulness, re-energizing, and actually there's loads of stuff on there about coaching and mentoring and personal development as well. There's stuff on there about addiction, but it's about understanding what is that? Well, what does addiction look like? Or stuff about therapy, like what are the different types of therapy and what might help me and how do I know what's right for me? Even right through to financial health as well, which obviously is a big thing for students too. And then obviously there's lots of videos, lots of information, lots of resources, and then it signposts you as well to various other resources too. But I would urge you to click the button that says join up for Silver MedDent, because then you not only do you all get all the videos, but then you're on our mailing list, and we're sending you weekly tips and hacks and strategies to help with stress and to help with performance. And very soon we will then be launching our regular, what we call our Tuesday drop-ins at lunchtime on Zoom, where anybody can join, and we'll be talking about a different subject every week.
There you go, guys. Sign up for Breathe right now. Sign up for Breathe. Also, when I come to the end of the conversation, I have a couple more questions. What made you want to leave periodontics? Why did you leave your clinical life behind?
So I still do some clinical work.
Okay.
And I think it's really important because I do work with the dental profession, and I obviously still teach dentistry. I think I'm quite happy being a wet finger dentist, and I still actually love perio, and I'm still pushing the boundaries. So my protocols are being used at Harvard. I was recently out in Boston speaking at Tufts and Harvard University. So I'm still waving that
Brilliant.
baton, just less so. So,
Okay.
hence having sold my practice and just doing a bit of clinical
How's
dentistry.
rephrasing? What made you take a bit of a step backwards?
But yeah, it took a step backwards because we're back to time, right?
Yeah.
So what was my priority and my passion, and definitely my purpose has shifted. That purpose of impact has shifted more through my own personal journey and stories, and combining all my business acumen as well, and my life experience and my time in dentistry to do what I do now, which is really impacting the profession in a much more powerful way beyond just the clinical skills journey. And I needed time for that.
Okay.
So there you go.
Awesome. The last question, Rana. If you can look at the camera for this one, what does success look like to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, like when I was your age, I probably would have said, a certain amount of money or having my own practice or 1 million qualifications and accolades, definitely more letters after my name than in my name. But now success is about having a sense of peace and joy within me, and I wake up every morning with a smile on my face and a joy, and there might be a load of rubbish happening, and yet I still find my inner joy, and that is truly success, because it's my ability to be myself.
Thank you so much, Rana.
Thank
There
you.
you are.
Thanks for having me.
Of
It's
course.
been a pleasure. I've been Afif.
I've been Fahim.
It's been a pleasure to have you listening. Thank you very much.